William Shakespeare was an English playwright, poet and actor, widely regarded as the greatest writer in the English language and the world's greatest dramatist. Shakespeare was the son of John Shakespeare, an alderman and a successful glove-maker originally from Snitterfield in Warwickshire, and Mary Arden, the daughter of an affluent landowning family. He was born in Stratford-upon-Avon, where he was baptized on April 26, 1564. His date of birth is unknown, but is traditionally observed on 23rd of April, St. George's Day. He was the third of 8 children, and the eldest surviving son. Although no attendance records for the period survive, most biographers agree that Shakespeare was probably educated at the King's New School in Stratford, a free school chartered in 1553, about a quarter-mile from his home. At the age of 18, Shakespeare married 26-year-old Anne Hathaway. The consistory court of the Diocese of Worcester issued a marriage license on November 27, 1582. The next day, 2 of Hathaway's neighbors posted bonds guaranteeing that no lawful claims impeded the marriage. The ceremony may have been arranged in some haste since the Worcester Chancellor allowed the marriage banns to be read once instead of the usual 3 times, and 6 months after the marriage Anne gave birth to a daughter, Susanna. 2 years later she gave birth to twins, son Hamnet and daughter Judith, and were baptized February 2, 1585. Hamnet died of unknown causes at the age of 11 and was buried August 11, 1596. By 1592, he had earned a reputation in London, but the years between are a mystery. These years are commonly referred to as the lost years. Shakespeare's first printed works were released during his tenure in London. Venus and Adonis and The Rape of Lucrece were 2 large poems. He was also a founder member of the Lord Chamberlain's Men, a theatrical troupe. For almost 2 decades, Shakespeare was the company's regular dramatist, creating 2 plays per year on average. After the death of Queen Elizabeth in 1603, the company was awarded a royal patent by the new King James I, and changed its name to The King's Men. Shakespeare's works were published and marketed as popular literature, according to records. Despite the fact that the theatre culture in 16th-century England was not well received by the upper classes, certain members of the nobility were generous patrons of the arts and friends of the performers. Shakespeare had written and released 15 of his 37 plays by 1597. According to civil documents, he bought the second-largest mansion in Stratford, called New House, for his family at this time. Because the journey from Stratford to London took 4 days by horse, Shakespeare is thought to have spent the most of his time in the city writing and acting, returning home only once a year during the 40-day Lenten period, when the theatres were closed. By 1599, Shakespeare and his business partners had established their own theatre, the Globe Theatre, on the Thames River South Bank. Shakespeare paid £440 for leases on real land in Stratford in 1605, which doubled in value and paid him £60 a year. As a result, he became both an entrepreneur and an artist, and experts believe that these investments allowed him to write his plays uninterrupted. Shakespeare's tragedies Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth were written after 1600, during his later time. Shakespeare's characters conveyed timeless and universal impressions of human disposition throughout these works. Shakespeare penned several tragic comedies throughout his dying years. Cymbeline, The Winter's Tale, and The Tempest are among them. They are not the dark tragedies of King Lear or Macbeth since they conclude with reconciliation and forgiveness, despite their graver tone than the comedies. All's Well That Ends Well, Measure for Measure, Timon of Athens, Coriolanus, Pericles, and Henry VIII are some of the other plays created during this time period. Shakespeare was working as an actor in London in 1608. In 1609 bubonic plague raged in London throughout. The London public playhouses were repeatedly closed during extended outbreaks of the plague, which meant there was often no acting work. Retirement from all work was uncommon at that time. Shakespeare continued to visit London during the years 1611 to 1614. In 1612, he was called as a witness in Bellet v Mountjoy, a court case concerning the marriage settlement of Mountjoy's daughter, Mary. In March 1613, he bought a gatehouse in the former Blackfriars Priory, and from November 1614, he was in London for several weeks with his son-in-law, John Hall. After 1610, Shakespeare wrote fewer plays, and none are attributed to him after 1613. His last 3 plays were collaborations, probably with John Fletcher, who succeeded him as the house playwright of the King's Men. He retired in 1613, before the Globe Theatre burned down during the performance of Henry VIII on 29 June. Shakespeare died on April 23, 1616, at the age of 52. He died within a month of signing his will, a document which he begins by describing himself as being in perfect health. He was survived by his wife and 2 daughters. Susanna had married a physician, John Hall, in 1607, and Judith had married Thomas Quiney, a vintner, 2 months before Shakespeare's death.